Their slain also shall be cast out, and their stink shall come up out of their carcasses, and the mountains shall be melted with their blood. Okay, you have to admit, that is a terrifying, incredibly vivid piece of apocalyptic imagery right there from the book of Isaiah, chapter 34. It paints this picture of just absolute divine devastation. But how in the world did we get to this nightmarish wasteland? Well, to figure that out, we actually need to rewind. We're going way, way back to the very dawn of creation. Welcome to this explainer. Today we are tracking what is essentially a mythological ghost story hidden right in plain sight. If you look really closely at the pristine, perfect paradise of Genesis, and then you jump forward to those apocalyptic wastelands of Isaiah, you'll notice a massive missing piece of the puzzle, an anomaly. We're going to dig deep into the original texts and read between the lines to uncover one of the darkest mysteries of ancient mythology. So, the central question driving our investigation today is this: who came before Eve? You probably know the story. If you read Genesis chapter 1, God creates man and woman at the exact same time. The text explicitly says, male and female created he them. But then you get to Genesis chapter 2, and suddenly Eve is being created later as this sort of secondary partner. So who was that very first woman, and where in the universe did she vanish to? To really understand this, we have to look closely at the environment she was supposedly cast out of. All right, Section 1, the Eden Anomaly. Think about the elements of Eden laid out in the text. It is a place of unbelievable abundance and perfect order. Genesis tells us about a river parting into 4 heads, including the Pison, which flows through a land where there is gold. And the gold of that land is good. There is bdellium and the onyx stone. We've got the tree of life planted right in the dead center of the garden. And we have a meticulously ordered animal kingdom. Out of the ground, God forms every beast and fowl and literally brings them to Adam to be named. Everything has a place, everything has a purpose. It's the ultimate utopia, right? But then we hit our first major textual problem. The text states, "It is not good that the man should be alone. I will make him an help meet for him." Despite naming all the cattle, the fowl, and the beasts, Adam is fundamentally isolated. The text is very specific here. Adam needs a help meet, which means a subordinate helper. But among all this mind-blowing perfection, one doesn't exist. The text plainly notes, for Adam there was not found an help meet for him. And here is where the textual anomaly gets totally fascinating. Notice the stark contrast in creation methods. Earlier in Genesis 2, the text tells us exactly how Adam was made. And the Lord God formed man of the dust of the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life. But when it's time to make this helpmeet for Adam, the method changes entirely. The Creator causes a deep sleep to fall upon Adam, takes one of his ribs, closes up the flesh, and from that bone builds the woman we know as Eve. She is quite literally made from his body. Which brings us to a profound analytical question. If God specifically put Adam to sleep and used a bone from his body to create Eve, treating her as a subordinate helpmeet made of his very flesh, what does this imply about the first attempt back in Genesis 1? If the first woman from Genesis chapter 1 was formed from the dust simultaneously with Adam, she wasn't a subordinate built from his rib. She was his absolute equal. The textual shift between chapters 1 and 2 suggests a massive realization. The first attempt was an equal partner, made of the earth, exactly like Adam. Which brings us to Section 2, the mythological gap. Enter Lilith, the implied first woman. Because the text goes out of its way in Genesis 2 to show Eve being made from a rib to guarantee she is a helpmeet, it heavily implies the entity before her was not made from a rib. Because Lilith was made of dust, equally, ancient mythology suggests she demanded absolute equality with Adam. She absolutely refused to be a subservient helpmeet. She wouldn't submit to the dynamic of Eden. And because she wouldn't play the subordinate role, she became a renegade. She had to leave the garden entirely. But where does an exiled, equal counterpart to humanity actually go? Let's find out in Section 3, the apocalyptic wasteland. We are jumping forward to a completely different, horrific destination described in Isaiah chapter 34. Isaiah paints a picture of absolute divine vengeance upon the nations, specifically focusing on Idumea and Bozrah. Look at these grim details from the text. The Lord's sword is bathed in heaven. The land is soaked with blood, and the dust itself is made fat with fatness from a massive slaughter of lambs, goats, bulls, and rams. It is a bleak, suffocating landscape defined by utter destruction and just unending violence. It's incredible. When you put them side by side, it's like looking at a photographic negative of Eden. In Genesis, we had the life-giving rivers, the Pison and the Gihon, flowing through lands of gold and precious onyx. But in Isaiah's wasteland, the text says, "And the streams thereof shall be turned into pitch, and the dust thereof into brimstone, and the land thereof shall become burning pitch. It is an unquenchable inferno. The smoke goes up forever." Moving on to Section 4, Lilith's resting place. If Eden was the perfect home for the obedient Adam and Eve, who inherits this terrifying, burning wasteland of pitch and brimstone? Well, Isaiah tells us exactly who moves in after the destruction. It becomes a literal court of chaos. Thorns and brambles overtake the fortresses. It becomes a habitation of dragons. And, terrifyingly, the text mentions the satyr, demonic, goat-like creatures crying out to their fellows in the ruins. These aren't just your standard animals. In the ancient context, these satyrs and dragons represent demonic, chaotic forces completely taking over the ruins of civilization. So, the crucial point is this. Amid all these monsters, dragons, and demons, where did God decide to banish the anomaly of Eden? Where did the Creator ultimately decide to place this mysterious first woman at the end of the day? The answer is hidden right there in verse 14 of Isaiah 34. The text reads, "The screech owl also shall rest there, and find for herself a place of rest." Right alongside the dragons and the satyrs, this entity finally finds her home in the burning pitch. Now, you might be wondering, why is this so significant? Because screech owl is simply a modern English translation. In the original Hebrew text of Isaiah 34:14, the word used here isn't an owl at all. It is literally the word lidlit. In ancient Semitic languages, this root word is intimately tied to the night. She is a creature of the dark, a night monster. The text is directly, explicitly linking the untamable first woman of Genesis, who rejected the light and order of Eden, to this ultimate kingdom of darkness and chaos. We are seeing a complete textual analysis of her journey from chapter to chapter. And finally, Section 5, the final fate. Look at how Isaiah 34:16 concludes this dark chapter. "Seek ye out of the book of the Lord and read. No one of these shall fail, none shall want her mate." The text literally guarantees that in this apocalyptic wasteland, every creature of chaos will be paired up. Adam got his obedient partner in the paradise of Eden, but Lilith, the banished equal who refused to submit, finally found her eternal mates among the monsters in the dark. It really forces us to ask, when we look at the margins of these ancient texts, who else's story has been buried in the ruins? Thanks for exploring this textual mystery with me.